I was born in 1937, and then in Los Angeles, and my father and my mother, they moved to Cedar City when I was still a baby. When the testing first started, I remember that they used to let us know if there were going to be an early morning flight at one, and we could see it looking to the west if we got up early enough. And we did. I saw, I don't know how many of them I saw, but I wasn't very old then. Then my parents got divorced. My mother moved to St. George, so I went to school down at Woodward High School for a couple of years. And down there, this one is the one I really remember very specifically, and you probably have heard about this one already. I was probably in the 10th grade, I think it's 10th grade in high school. And we got an announcement that school is going to be let out and everybody's supposed to go home. They didn't tell us why. Well, a little while later, it started kind of coming out of the sky. It looked like it was soot coming out, or it's more like it was black, and it was it's like a fire, like ashes from a fire spreading. We're out playing baseball, but we had seen some fires around, but not like this before. And it turned out that this was the reason they were let us out from school, is because they were afraid that the wind had changed up there after, I guess, was in the morning. Explosion, either Yucca Flats or Nevada Flats, or Frenchman's Flats, I should say, Yucca Flats or Frenchman's Flats. I'm not sure which one it was, but anyway, it came right over the top of St. George, the high school down there, and my mother was working at that time, and she eventually died of a cancer that would qualify her and her family from the Downwinders program. And a couple of my brothers started doing that, and to qualify for it, it was a pain, and they just kind of gave up. And that was several years ago, and I'm the oldest one in the family, and I've never been involved with going for the money or anything like that. But I have been in that area numerous times. I was an officer in the Navy, and I got volunteered to become a loading officer for nuclear weapons. And so I did have some other background in it besides this. And after that, when I went through the school for that, which was in San Diego, I learned a lot about what had happened in St. George and what potentially could happen, and it did happen to my mother. My mother was born and raised in St. George, and my father was born and raised in Canby, Minnesota, and he moved out there along with his brother, one of his brothers, my father worked for a plate company in Cedar City called Miller Auto Parts, and when I was born in Los Angeles, my father was undergoing training as a diesel mechanic. And he worked for Clarence Miller, who owned that for a long time. And then my parents divorced. My father ended up being a truck driver down in Las Vegas. By the way, it's another side story. At one time, you remember seeing some of the movies of the blast. They had palm trees that were being knocked over by these things. Well, my father was driving a flatbed truck, and one of the contracts was to drive them up there. So that's all he did. He drove the palm trees up there. I don't know where they grew, but they took them up there, and they planted them in the ground up there, because they certainly wouldn't grow naturally up there. But they were put in the ground to test, I suppose, to see what the effects would be from the blast. He did not have any clearances. He was just a truck driver, and he was taking the trucks up either Yucca Flat or Frenchman Flat. He said he had taken to both places. I'm not sure if he really knew that or not. But they were flatbed trucks, and they hauled these trees up, which they eventually planted in the ground to use during the testing. And he told me about one time when he came to visit me when we were living in St. George. And so that happened not long before or after that one thing I told you about with when we were in school and we're told to go home, instead we went out and started playing baseball. So a lot of us got that on us. And in our class, graduating in 55, we've talked about this a lot of it. A lot of us have had friends and parents, and some of us have died from cancers that perhaps were caused by the Downwinder situation. And in my case, I do have one brother with cancer, and my mother died and it was initially diagnosed as cancer in her bone cancer in her head, but it turned out to be it was metastasized from there from breast cancer. So she ended up dying in St. George as a result of that, and that the cancer she ended up being in her later years. That's where she was dying when she was down there in a nursing home. Well, I don't think we're being told a whole lot. In fact, like I told you before, I learned more about the nuclear testing when I went into the service than I learned by far from reading about it in the newspaper. Because the only paper my family received was a local. It was called at that time. It was called the Iron County Record, and of course some of the notifications were in there, I assume. And there was a radio station in Cedar City at that time. I think it was called KSUB, and they would be. That's where the notifications would come from and they would send them out to notify so we could look over and we could see the flashes of them across the mountains through there. I remember seeing at least two or three. I'm not sure. It was definitely more than one. It was either two or three that I got up for. To see the flashes looking over, and it literally lit up the sky out to the west.